Welcome to Rock and Recovery. Your host Jay. I've got a special guest. Her name is Heather Ann Ferri. I hope I say that last name right. And before we get going, I want to talk about this month is Suicide Prevention Month. 988 in the U.S. and Canada, 111 in the U.K. Reach out, talk to your neighbors. If you know somebody that's going through it, reach out and see how they're doing. Just let them know that they matter and you can see them and they're seen. That's sometimes all it takes. Also, it is Recovery Awareness Month. We do recover and we recover out loud, and we're proud about it. No hiding in the shadows for us. Let's go. Let's bring Heather up here. She's got a lot to tell you about. Did she know? She was a tap dancer. I'm just saying.
I just wanted to compliment your intro by saying, I think we need to have more conversations about not just like sort of just acknowledging people and then their pain. And even know that like a lot of people have PTSD and, are suicidal. We have a lot of shame, PTSD. We have a lot of shame built up. So, we may not tell people, oh, I'm in trouble, but it's just like, you are right. Just giving somebody a little card, putting a card on their doorstep saying, hey, I just wanted to let you know I was thinking about you today. We're forgetting about these little things because I went through some very deep sicknesses, life-threatening, and people really didn't show up. And I can't judge them. There's a point in my life where you just sort of go, okay, maybe this needs to be a training, right. But we need to start to understand like, for me healing, I didn't want people in my space all the time, but you could send a card. You could do a GoFund,
or a little text now, just a text,
there's really simple things to do to let people know that they matter. And sometimes it's just smiling at them,
right.
And so I appreciate what you just said.
That's something funny. I just found out from a friend of mine that they're bringing back Toys R Us, and talk about childhood trauma. I don't want to grow up because of them, It's true. They're bringing Toys R Us back, and I still remember the jingle, I'm not going to sing it here, but I know it, and talk about childhood trauma, taking Toys R Us away from me. That was childhood trauma. That's adult trauma. What are you talking about? So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and tell everybody else that's listening about you and how you managed dealing with your brain injury and your trauma and how you came back from that.
Sure. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is predominantly, back in the 70s, blue collar, Steel City. And my parents met as high school sweethearts, married young, and both came from severe generational traumas in their bloodlines, which we didn't even hear that phrase back then. I don't even think we even knew what that meant. And, life happens. My dad lost his job by his father's company at age 7. He was fired by his father. That was a big blow. He was depressed. He was confused. He had dyslexia, I believe from his childhood trauma. And my mom was upset. And, then the next year when I was 8 years old, my mom would come in the mornings before school and attack me from behind, almost choking me to death. And this became a routine and screaming horrific things to me. So brain damage, I know a lot about it. Took extreme road less traveled because I didn't trust the doctors. If they didn't see my childhood pictures where I look like I have a massive stroke, and I was over medicated, sinus infections.
Why was she doing that? Why did she ever give you a reason, or do you ever find out why she was?
I'm a trauma expert outside the box. So I worked 17 years as a private coach with people who traveled all over the world to work with me, from doctors to construction workers. I do not work with one science. I work with 10. Most of them are not being trained in mental health or rehabs at this point, which is an issue. So people who are abusers, they don't go out and just say, I'm going to abuse my children. It's a program that is either been downloaded from their bloodline or from their past lives, if you believe in that.
Right.
So it's complicated. And my journey with my mom, it wasn't a quick fix of understanding why she did that. And at one point I surrendered, not wanting to know, because At some point, you have to just take care of yourself. I had a lot of rewiring to do, shaking out trauma, getting the right things in my house to, to help my health. But as I kept healing ancestral trauma, which we're starting to hear about in society, because you are your ancestors, they're in your bones and your blood. I started to understand that my mom's side, my maternal side, had a lot of women from slavery. So I do believe that her predator programs come from that, which makes it complicated because you think, oh, slave, you would be a victim. Well, no, we're in an environment, we're learning programs. So you want to be careful what you're listening to.
And is that like internal influences or external influences? Or when you're talking about listening, are you listening to your own body or outside influences? Or
so I do brain protocols, which are not that easy to do because it takes discipline. Okay. It's not a quick fix. We don't rewire your brain in a day. We can rewire it in a couple months if you're like one of those martial arts or professional dancer students. That's where that training comes in. But you and I know when you're an addict, not so easy. Because that darkness, that negative mind comes in and it just wants to sabotage you and it just wants you to go back to the fix and it doesn't want to feel the pain. And I get that. And I've had incredible amounts of pain and it's hard. It's hard to feel that pain. But when I say to the audience what you're listening to, anything you're listening to is a form of programming. So if you're listening to a television show and you think, oh, I'm just chilling out, it's not a big deal. You're listening to programs. So my mom listened to television all day long. She listened to soap operas. And back in the 70s, I could tell you in the 80s, as a little girl, I was sitting in the kitchen listening to the dialogue. And I knew then that dialogue was not appropriate. You cannot hurt somebody, whether it's physical, sexual, or verbal abuse, and then the next day cover it up with a gift. And a lot of those shows taught that. So your kids are sitting in front of a screen, whether it's social media, which is scary, or whether it is television. And if you don't really understand the people who created that show,
or you're not paying attention.
Their intentions, their energies, what are you downloading? Because you are downloading something. Whether you want to admit it or not. So that's why when I went through what I call, and some people might not understand what it's like, a second dark night of the soul is it's like hitting rock bottom. You lose your friends, you lose a lot of your work, your health is horrible. And as a shaman, as a healer, this is our ritual. This is how we get good at what we do. And I'm really good at what I do. But it took a lot of near death and it took a lot of pain and it took a lot of saying, I'm not going to just take the pills and I'm not going to do this. It takes a strength and that comes actually from my soul. And I understand not everybody's in that lane, and
a lot of that times people that have that trauma will turn to addiction just because they don't want to deal with that.
I agree. I think it's twofold. I think it's not so much that it could be that they don't want to deal with it, or it could be that they don't know how. And that's sort of issues with, I can speak on the state of PA. I had a lot of parents over the years hear about my reputation as a trauma expert outside the box. They started to see how my pictures, I was anti-aging. Every time I was on social media, I had a new science incorporated in. So it wasn't one science. It was a lot of sciences.
As much as you could get.
And dance that made sense to trauma. Now, there are sciences that I would not recommend for trauma, even though I love them, And what I found in the state of PA is I started hearing the stories of the parents who were losing their children. And I asked them questions because questions are important. What did they do in the rehab? Did they do brain rewiring? No. Did they do water? Did they have clean water? No. Did they do parasite cleanses? No. Did they do body somatic shake? So what are they doing? What are they doing is the question. So I have to say, we need new programming. We need new types of teachers. And if you're an addict out there, or you're somebody who's recovering, I want to say, I have compassion for you. We have a failed system, and I'm a stats person. So I'm
Right.
not impressed with what we've been doing with rehab. And I'm just telling you, like, if you are motivated, you're on the right channel. We're the game changers. We're the ones talking about, we're the ones saying, back in the day when we lived in the forest, somebody said, you know what, I took this herb and it helped me with this, and let's try it. We
Right.
might want to go back to some of those roots, of where,
Yeah.
we might be a little bit more successful. So that's a little bit of my soapbox on that. I'm very passionate. I can get very.
So, I think a lot of addiction is really just a side effect of however we use to cope with it. Cope with trauma sometimes.
Oh,
sometimes,
absolutely.
sometimes there wasn't any trauma. It's just maybe I want to just fit in.
Oh, and I mean, that's trauma. I've had clients because they knew my story and it was kind of severe. And some of them were kind of felt a lot of shame because they had addictions and they had issues. And then we would do some of the PTSD brain protocol. And it doesn't just teach your nervous system, but it's teaching you about yourself. And then they would tell me a story. And they would say, I know it's not a big deal. And I was like, wait, no.
If you're telling it, it's a big deal.
It is a big deal. It's a big deal to your soul. And that's the biggest thing is you don't have to have the severity of my trauma. There is something off when you're an addict. When I'm reaching for sugar, I was a severe sugar addict for many years, and it was not easy to heal it because it was deep. Because whenever I couldn't have a voice with the men in my family, I went to the sugar. Whenever I felt like I couldn't have a voice at work or there was some sort of weird thing happen, I went to the sugar.
And you can substitute sugar for any type of drug or alcohol that there is, and it'd be the same thing.
Yeah. And so I just started to write in a journal about it. I started to feel my feelings. I started to try to understand what is going on. What is it about me? And I'm looking, and a lot of times it's a trauma of something that hurt your soul, your heart, and you're losing love for yourself. And maybe you're looking for love in all the wrong places. And I get that too. And people looking for love in all the wrong places are workaholics. I was that. They're very OCD rigid. They're very hard on themselves. Addicts are actually very hard on themselves. They're very sensitive people because maybe your parent or your school or your environment was like, just get over it. Don't feel. Well, you know what?
Yes.
You got to feel. Men need to cry. Okay.
Absolutely.
You need to cry and you need to feel. And we as women need to allow them to as well in this environment. Because I think a lot of the Hollywood films painted certain images, stereotypes of both the male and the woman. And this is how we behave. And it's like, no, when I had my private trauma practice, I say the people who sat in front of me after a few sessions, it wasn't the 50-year-old or the 65-year-old, the CEO or the plumber. It was the little child sitting in front of me, feeling safe enough to feel vulnerable about whatever. And some of it was, abuse, like maybe they were the abuser, and healing that shame of that. And how do you become a better person?
Right. So I know you talk about the inner child. So what is that? How do you start to get back to that?
That's a good question. So I can only speak for myself, having like that severity of PTSD and brain damage. You got to heal the brain a bit. You have this body and this vessel. So, I deal with water education. I have a free ebook. I deal with plant-based superfoods, education, herbs. These are basic fundamentals that you deal with every day. I really think they should be in rehabs. But then the PTSD, the ADHD, these types of brain protocols were my game changer. And were my clients' game changer. A lot of my clients had done everything around the world under the sun. So it was a great example of seeing the consistency of brain work. And I think my theater arts adds to it because you're either doing finger movements with breath patterns, with sounds that we call chanting, but they're universal sounds. So instead of saying, I love you, we're saying like Ramadasa. That's Sanskrit. That's the oldest language in the Mother Earth. And what's the difference in that is, especially in America, when you're abused or you're bullied or you're watching programming all day, you're listening to an English vocabulary.
Right.
And you're interpreting it. So when my mother is abusing me and then she's telling me I love you, do you think that that adds up? No. So I love you becomes the opposite meaning.
So that I love you means that you're getting hit, you're getting abused. And that's what you interpreted I love you as is
your system does, because your body can't, you can lie.
Right.
That's why I'm not a big analytical talk all day, because the analytical can lie, but the body will always know the truth. And so when you're running for the addiction, when you're running for something to fill you up, it's because the body is going, something's off, but I don't know how to deal with it. So when I did the childhood trauma brain protocol, and the ADHD, that works on dyslexia, which I was never diagnosed as, and I was never diagnosed as ADHD. But that flipped the script of my emotional intelligence. And that's using these Sanskrit vowel sounds instead of English words. So eventually you will say, I love you, and here I love you. And it will mean the actual behavioral patterns of those words.
Right.
But for a lot of us, those
not
words
what we were taught to, not what the I love yous that we were taught
in our tissues. You know, it's
Right.
a different type. If you're hit on the shoulder by your father and he's telling you this, this, and that, and then the next day he gives you a gift and he's like, oh, wait, I love you. Are you really going to believe him? No.
Monetary love, through possessions.
Yeah. Children are smart, and all children are very intuitive and I think our society, specifically in the United States, has really dumbed down our children. Because I did children's programs for a while too.
I would happen to agree.
They just want to be able to. So I think medical meditations should be with our children. That's why the one thing I was an advocate for all my private clients was, if there was a child in the family or a relative that wanted to learn, I was like, they can come into the classroom, the Zoom, or do your homework one day a week with them. Get other family members or friends or
get involved
so that everybody's upgrading or supporting the upgrade. I think everybody needs upgraded. I mean, you can always upgrade your brain, right?
So what was your I'm sorry to cut you off, but what was your healing journey? What did that entail? How did you go about, and what made you get into this type of work, this line of work, honestly? Because it sounds difficult. I mean, because I talk to people all the time with trauma, and sometimes, if I'm not in the right space myself, I can get affected by that trauma for just them telling it to me, and I've got to be very aware of, there's a line there. It's not mine to deal with. And so how did you decide to get into this after your healing journey, or through your healing journey, or how?
I think it was written before I even came here. I think and I don't think I even have begun my work. I think that I am when you enter your 50s and you enter a stage of expertise, I'm disgusted with what's going on in the United States with mental health. And I'm going to be a change gamer and getting some other things facilitated. Now, with that said, how did I get started? So everybody has a blueprint and a journey. Some people are the people who are going to start to heal this to help themselves, which then changes the paradigm of the whole family system. Like I always say, you're not going to change the people around you. But when you heal and do work, it actually does change them, even if it triggers them.
Right.
So for me, I hit a very serious rock bottom because I was starting to do energy work because I was aware that my childhood abuse, like I was aware that my behavioral patterns were unhealthy at around 38 years old. And in that process, I started to lose my ability to walk. I had a lot of pain in my left leg, and I went to traditional medicine for about 8 months, physical therapies that made everything worse. And as everything was getting worse, and it was really weird. I was already a certified yoga. I was a Pilates, a really great instructor in New York City, but I'm in Pittsburgh now. I had all this dance education background with a degree. I was a professional dancer. So I know the body, and my body should not have been breaking down. I had not done anything physically, so I knew it was trauma. And nobody had trauma education. The physical therapist didn't have trauma, or whatever trauma education they had was extremely limited, and it wasn't experiment. Like I had the experience of it. That's a different education than saying, oh, I read it in a book. Books are great, but if you haven't actually rewired your brain, like my blood disorder's gone, if you haven't done these things, you don't have any experience in them.
Right. Life experience is way better than any book knowledge. Yes, book knowledge can be refined and teach you things, but the best experience is life experience.
So what happened is that I met, I mean, I was like getting dizzy. I mean, it was scary. Most people would have just got medicated at that point, but I was like, there was something in my soul because I had been over medicated as a child and angry at the doctors. There was a rebel in me. There was something in my soul that was like, I am not settling for these diagnoses. I'm not settling for these pills anymore. That's just my journey. Okay. I can only speak from that.
Right.
And I went 45 minutes in a car, which was, it was really hard to drive. Like it was really hard to drive to see this man who was a professional dancer in New York, had physical therapy degrees, but had a lot of understanding of how trauma is stored in the connective tissues and bones and how it has to be released through involuntary shaking. He knew in 5 minutes that my body that was becoming a straitjacket was all because of the childhood abuse. Wow. And what I would learn later, the abuses of my bloodline within my mom and dad's lineages. So he worked with me, but it was very hard to drive there. I got to be honest with you. Like I could have wrecked easily.
Right.
And he taught me as much. And he said, I'm going to teach you what you need to do at home to take you to the next level. And I'm a great student. So I took all what I could. And then I took that science to a whole new level now. I know a whole other way of doing it, making it easier. And that will be within leaders and conversations. So that started the point. And then the brain protocols, they have science. They're not utilized in the United States. I have furthered them to another level. Water education came in. Water science is misled in America. I've taken that to, and then it's just all these sciences that have, and then as far as like becoming a trauma coach or having doctors or scientists hire me, I never, ever thought that was going to happen. But that was definitely something higher, whether you believe in God,
right.
Whatever you believe in, it was something higher. And it was definitely designed to make me see that they did not have these educations. And that they thought that their health issues or their mental health issues or their lots of sugar addictions, they fluffed off pain and trauma. We are a very analytical society, I think, still. And I think it's worse because there is so much cell phone, computer technology, AI now. I'm not against AI, but I think we're becoming
rely on it too
extremely
much.
Codependent.
Yeah.
Somebody else will think my ideas now.
Right.
Somebody else will take over my soul now. Somebody else, and that is scary to me, especially for these young. When I talk to the young kids that I've been hanging out lately in the parks and the mothers, it's been great to get a feed. They're concerned. And I said, you should be concerned. Turn the television off. Get your kid outside. Get them playing in the dirt again. Get them planting food. Get them caring about Mother Earth again. Get them
coming home when the lights come on.
Yeah, and get them fighting with each other and then making up
Yes,
at the end of the day.
yes,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
Like it's like,
Confrontation, socialization. The
yeah.
socialization on kids these days is almost none. The only interactions they have are at school, and then they come home, and then what are they doing? Interacting with people online. It's crazy. And that, I could go a whole show on that. I don't agree with
Maybe
it,
another
but
show for that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but what is a water science? I heard you mention it a couple of times. What is water science? I mean, it's not just the study of water or what's in the water. So what exactly is a water science?
This is a deep one for me. I mean, I would say to anybody even a bit curious about the water to definitely download my free ebook on my website, Heather and Ferri, and to follow me on Facebook because I'm on a water investigator mission. And what I mean by that is Mother Earth is mostly water. It's a feminine planet. That's why it's called Mother Earth. When you think of a mother, when you think of being in the womb for 9 months, you're in water mostly. So the quality of water you drink matters. And
Mm,
we have had a corruption with water, and
mm.
it's not a quick fix to heal it, even though our leaders will try to pretend it is. And if we don't,
Fluoride, chlorine, all those. Yeah. Mm.
if we don't get to the roots of where it started, just like healing generational trauma, how do we really heal it? How do we really change? How do we really change our thoughts and psychology? So I could tell you right now that plastic is bad. I mean,
Yeah.
there's many documentaries. And so you might want to start asking the question, why do we have plastic everywhere now? Why do we have plastic water bottles everywhere in schools and parks, in medical facilities? It's growing like a virus. Many companies that own many other companies. It's a billion-dollar industry.
It's all oil company. It's oil
It
money.
is. And when people do my ebooks and they do a consult, you can do a consultation with me, or you can just order, because I'm very clear on science in my ebook, and I'm very clear how to order if you want to just do that. But they'll say, oh, I have this filter, or I have this water device. And I will have to politely say, we all have to be willing to upgrade. If you're working with me, you're going to upgrade, and we'll do it gradually. It's cost effective, how you want to do it. But if you've invested in something, there might need to be an upgrade. So sometimes I have to say to people, are you aware that that company is under a lawsuit in Vegas right now? Because there's a law firm tackling the filtration companies and the bottle companies, but it's a tricky dance and nobody's talking about it for a reason. And nobody's paying attention to it for a reason. But I'm going to tell you, if you go on my websites, the before and after, how I look young, how my body looks young at 53, why my women are like, your skin looks amazing. You might want to make sure your water filter takes out forever chemicals. There's only one company that I know, third-party certification in the United States out of 20,000 companies selling that does. And it's actually cost effective. Then you might say, well, I have a home system. Great. But your home system, any home system I'm representing myself. I don't represent any company with my psychology here today. Does not take out for drinking water what needs to be taken out. So if you have a home system, you still need a different type of filter under your sink for drinking water. So it's very complicated.
Right.
And this should be taught, honestly, by our doctors and nutritionists, but you'd be surprised at how many don't know it. Even like, think of the idea, I go to a restaurant in Pittsburgh, which I don't do anymore. And everybody looks at me like, I know I was judged by my whole community when I stopped going to the restaurants, not because I don't love restaurants. We actually had a family business years ago in restaurants, but because what are you cleaning your food with? Tap water. What is being absorbed into so salads are the worst in restaurants. You have more chemicals than you could possibly imagine because they're oil-based, and there's only certain types of things that take the chemicals off your food. This is the details of being like a water,
the pesticides, all those
specialist. And I had to do this to heal myself. And a lot of my clients who were chemists, at first they thought I was crazy. But then once they started looking at the research, which some people don't have the patience to do, but I'll give it to
Right.
you. And then they started trying my water and feeling this feels different. This doesn't like I'm not bloated. Like what? And when you have brain damage, so when I first started drinking this electrolyzed reduced water, which is a medical grade water, I'd get dizzy because it's actually feeding my cells. So could you imagine a rehab center having this type of water?
Wow, that's crazy.
Like it would make perfect sense, right?
And we're always taught that we got to, drink lots of water, because that does flush the body out. But what's it putting it in? What's going into it either? It's got to be good water, I guess. You got to have good water. I grew up on a farm, that had really good water coming filtered through sandstone, so it was like natural water. Yeah, we drank it from the faucet because
most people are dehydrated, and they don't even know it. You know it by the skin, and you know it by your hair texture. My hair texture's changed drastically. My hair is thicker now. Your pineal and pituitary glands. So even shower filters, I refer one by our company. It's only $90. And it is the best because of the third-party certifications and what makes it different. Like I feel like when it comes to the subject matter of water, our government and our local people, leaders should take this very seriously, but they're not. Because it is
I always thought my mom was a little cuckoo when she had filters on everything and bought bottled waters. I mean, she's got 2 or 3 cases of water sitting at her house. And she's like, Jay, can you carry these upstairs? I'm like, no, you get that shit. Of course I do, but still, she's sending me to the store for bottled water. I'm like, why do you want? I know Florida water is no good, so I don't drink it out of the tap either. But still,
Oh, you're in Florida?
Oh yeah.
Oh, they're awful. I've done
yeah.
There. You got the worst. We in PA.
I won't drink the water out of the tap. I won't do it.
It's like yellow. I mean, it's not even. You're not even faking it there.
No,
I mean, it's like
I go to the ocean to get clean because it's cleaner than my tap water. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. And you know what? I started out buying bottled water and then I had a client come to me. And she wrote something on her liability form. And I was like, what is that? And then she brought me this water and I started drinking it. And I was like, there's something different here. Explain this. So that was 15 years ago. And if people are following me, there's a couple podcasts I do that we're just talking water. So if you're really wanting to dive deeper into that, my big thing is you don't have to agree with me, but you do have to investigate, and you do have to come with facts. You know what I mean? You got to come with some facts.
Find out on your own. That's always don't take my word for it. Go find it, for yourself.
Well, I wouldn't say find it for yourself because it took me 10,000 hours to figure out the water.
Well, okay, it might not take you finding it by yourself.
But I would say if you're questioning my ebook, you got to come back with facts.
Right.
You got to come back with so what's sad is, and this is when we don't have regulations, is companies are putting lies on their websites.
Right,
and if you don't know how to research certification third party, you're thinking, oh, it takes this stuff out.
No.
And guess what? It doesn't.
So back to your healing journey and CTPSD and PTSD, and how were you able to go from that to what you're doing now? I mean, how were you able to heal yourself or get through that trauma to doing what you're doing now? And that's advocating for trauma, advocating for healing.
So I had my first, when I lost my ability to walk for 2.5 years, that was about 12 years ago. And I still worked. I started coaching people on Zoom. So I never claimed, and I don't have any issues with disability. I never claimed it because I didn't want to be harassed by the doctors to take pills. So I was always a conservative financially. I lived very minimalist. I was tight with my money because I knew that I would need money if I needed to take off work. So within this last 11 years, I was hired as a private trauma coach, whether that was through Zoom or people flying in, or I told you I worked for a bit of time in an alternative clinic before it was shut down.
Right.
So I would work. And then at night, we're talking about 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., I would be doing trauma-based work for myself. So I never had a life. I didn't go on vacations. I didn't have much of a social life. I didn't date much because I was a little obsessed with trying to heal. Like I was sick and I was like, I got to figure this out. As I got better, then I hit another rock bottom, which I just, so all I can say is there was no, it wasn't an easy process. I'm a warrior. I'm very resilient. I've dealt with pain that most people would just check out. And it doesn't make me better than anybody else. It just makes me on a mission. And I'm on a mission now. So it's just, if you feel sorry that people aren't helping you or nobody cares, I've been there. I've actually been betrayed and I've had evil people at me. If you feel like the system has failed, it has, but you can't sit there. If you're on this podcast, you're here for a reason.
That's
Go
right.
on my website and start doing some research and make some actions, because I took actions. And I took actions because I was listening to my inner intuitive self more than the outside world. When everybody's saying, oh, my mom's a big, well, everybody has back pain in our family. Well, everybody has this in our family. And I was like, no, I'm not that. And I don't have any of those things anymore. So you have to be the game changer for yourself. You have to say no, and so angels come in. You might think I channel angels now, and I, never used to think that was even possible. But the angels come in, they say, do this and do that. So if somebody throws you on this podcast, it might be an angel saying, you got to listen to these people. There's something here, investigate it, try something new. I tried a lot of sciences early on that I love, but I had to throw out. They're not trauma based. And I don't want to down them or be negative, but I'm very specific because when you're in a lot of pain, you want to get out of that as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, and going into that, I know it's hard for some people to even want to start. You have to be in a really good spot to start working with your trauma. You have to, and you know what, being an addict, that potentially can put you back into addiction as you're coming out of it. So, but you can't do it while you're using. You can't, because it's just not going to be the same. So you have to get clean first and sober first, and then start working on that trauma. Take whatever tools you have and whatever help is offered, and just start dealing with that trauma slowly, because it's going to bring it up. And I know you said almost, it sounded like EMDR. You're tapping and chanting. And that's almost like an EMDR therapy, which is a rapid eye movement to your trauma, and it's bring it up.
A lot more than that. I've done EMDR. It's a lot more than that. And they are different. When I say PTSD brain protocol, that has PubMed research. When I say ADHD brain protocol, that has PubMed research. When I say OCD brain protocol, that's a hard brain protocol. When I say childhood trauma brain protocol, these all do have PubMed research. They're just not popular in the United States because they take some self-discipline, because you are learning about your breath patterns by doing them. You're learning about your sound when your voice shakes or you lose your voice. You're learning about sensations in your body. So EMDR is kind of, if it helps you, great, do it. But for me, I think it's like a baseline. A baseline. This is a multi-dimensional, intelligent brain rewiring for these things. And when you train in them, it actually upgrades your intelligence. It empowers you. You're becoming the martial arts of the rewiring of your brain, in essence. So it's not for everyone, because if you have a short attention span or a big ego, I find a lot of predators don't do well with the brain protocols, and a lot of victims do. And I find that very interesting.
Wow. That does kind of not make sense at all, but it does make a sense, and you've got, like somebody said, somebody put in the chat, you have to want to heal more than being okay with where you are. And that's true. If you want to stay stuck in your trauma, okay, that's on you, you know. But if you think it's too scary to move forward, it is, but it gets less scary as you let it go. And sometimes it's just that push, or whenever they're ready, they're going to do it, you know, no matter how they do it.
I also think like I hit rock bottom. I'm gonna be honest, like twice.
Yeah.
I'm a stubborn soul. I had to hit really hard. And sometimes people need to do that. But what I will say is when you start to hear, and I really love being on, I'm going to be honest, I really love being on some of the smaller podcasts right now,
Yes.
because I think that they offer more of a genuine, practical thing. I'm concerned that maybe we're hearing the same stuff over on the mainstream big platforms that may not be practical.
That are more popular opinion than practical.
Right. More bought out opinions than really practical stuff. And so what I would say, you know, is like, if you feel like, oh, there's something to this, do like, I'm creating a store and go on to the ebook.
Yeah.
It's free, and start to sort of be inspired by the fact that someone has done it, because we have to take those stories and go, okay, if someone's done this and it was really hard, but she blah, blah, blah. What can
and
I
she
do?
Documented it. Let me see what works with that worked for her that can work for me. And it doesn't have to be such an experimental process going through it. You know, yeah, absolutely. And that's what this whole podcast is about, is just bringing hope. And that's the whole thing. We've got a light at the end of the tunnel. There is hope. There is a way to recover. There's a way to even deal with your mental health, but you've got to want it, and you've got to take the steps to do it.
You know, and I have another thought too, by what you just said. I worked 8 years as an independent contractor in senior homes for Alzheimer's and dementia. Now you got to understand, I have no medical degree here. Okay. You know how I got that job? Through a client who had worked with me. And then I helped her with grieving her abused father who died at the senior home. They hired me for a brain protocol. You're sitting out there, you're frustrated maybe with the centers that are around you, or maybe they're not offering. Some of you have a voice. Some of you have power. Use it wisely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the key right there. Those people that know that people are listening to them got to speak up for them too, but not lead them down the wrong path, you know, because it's so easy to get enamored with somebody that you're doing whatever this person's doing, and all of a sudden you're not doing so great because this person's not doing so great. You know, you've got to be your own person. But yeah, take advice.
That's what I love about the brain protocols, and that's what I love about my work, is because I grew up with a psychopath narcissist who was the dictator of the household. I'm not your guru. I'm not your master. I'm a master teacher, but I'm not your master teacher. I'm the toolkit.
Right.
I'm the guide, but you're going to have to do the work.
Yeah.
And the things that changed in my coaching was that if you show up and you keep missing doing your homework, you're not going to heal. And I can't do anything about it.
It's just like going to school and not turning in the work and not doing the work. You're going to fail. You might pass just for being there. But
and the crazy thing is I'm not going to judge you either.
Right.
But you cannot judge me. And you cannot judge the sciences that I've seen consistently work if you do not do the protocols for 3 months. You do not do the homework. And like you said in the beginning, it is hard for addicts. They have to get off the addiction. And the things that were so challenging with the parents that were coming to me is that they felt that the addictions got worse in a lot of these environments because, like I said, we're not upgrading in our sciences. And so we need to have rehabs change some of their protocols.
I 100% agree with that. And, you know, sometimes rehabs, just the wrong rehabs and recovery centers are all about the Benjamin. They're all about the quick dollar. They're all about keeping addicts needing something. So it's a revolving door. It is. It's a revolving door. Oh, let's pass him through this time with this kind of other addiction. Oh, so then he can come back and do this other addiction, and we'll give him some more pharmaceuticals. And it's just a big, huge revolving circle. And if you're in a recovery center, I hope you're in the right kind of recovery center. I hope you're doing the right thing. Just do your homework before you decide to go to a recovery center. Most nonprofits are there for the right reason. I'm telling you, the nonprofit recovery centers are probably some of the best you'll go to because they're there for no profit. They're there for you, and that goes across the board. It doesn't matter if it's from grief, self-harm, suicidal ideations, or any of those. You get into that center, and if it's a nonprofit, they're going to put in more work for you.
And that's interesting that you mentioned that, Jay, because I am trying to work with nonprofits because they can get more grant money.
Absolutely.
And they can get that grant money if they can understand how to utilize certain systems, like even the water system that I have. The first 2 years, this is 14 years ago, people could do water pickups in my apartment. They could come with glass containers and pick up the medical grade water every other day because the healing properties die after 2 days to have an experience. Why aren't our centers offering that for the addicts? Right. You know what I mean? And documenting the results of that. If your brain is mostly water, I'm not quite sure why you're not studying the water that people are consuming right now.
Very true. Very true. And, so before we get going, because we got another 10, 15 minutes, tell me about Jimmy Slide and how that was working with him. Didn't he work with Shirley Temple?
No,
I'm thinking
that was Bojangles.
Okay, so I knew, but I know I've seen him on stage.
Oh, Jimmy Slide was in a lot of the movies, and a lot of Broadway shows. And my experiences. So when I moved to New York City, very troubled. I lived on 58th and Columbus Circle in New York City, above a jazz club called Le Cave. And basically I was walking every day, determined to, get work in show business. And I was very driven. And there was those event signs and I never looked at them, that. And then one day I was like, I looked at it and Jimmy Slide, there's a picture of Jimmy Slide. And I'm like, I know that tap master. I saw him on television and I was fascinated with Gregory Hines. And I was fascinated with the sounds. And I was a tap dancer. That was my first voice. I tap danced in my house because I wasn't really allowed to talk. Right. It wasn't safe to talk. So I went into the club. I write about this in my book. I talk about this a lot in my keynotes, but, I went into the club, watched him and others dance for 4 hours. I was mesmerized by Jimmy Slide. Wow. Jimmy Slide was not just gifted. He had an auric field that had a lot of light. And when he smiled, your body kind of tingled because you were like faced with somebody that was a higher frequency, a divine masculine who wasn't just there to entertain you, but he was also there to spiritually open you up. I almost feel like his work was of a healer. And basically, that night I tried to sneak out. We had this interaction. I had this really deep, visceral, like my body cried for hours. And then the next month, I'm in the club. I have my tap shoes in my bag and I'm thinking he's just going to forget about me. They'll just do the show. And after a couple numbers, he literally stared at me and said, and it's really bizarre because he didn't know who I was. He was like, we have somebody special tonight. And he pulled me on that stage.
Oh no. He threw you under the bus, basically.
I never worked with a jazz band in my life. And I tap danced to It Don't Mean a Thing. And that started my career and learning with the masters. But I'm going to tell you, the reason why I talk about Jimmy Slide is he talked to me off the stage. And a lot of the masters did. They were very beautiful men who cared about the soul of me, not how I looked on the outside.
Right.
But who I really was on the inside. They asked me questions and I was very broken during that time period. And I'm like almost getting teary eyed right now, like they're choked up. But, I went through my careers, many tribes, many experiences in business. And I can look back and say, those men were special.
Right. That's awesome. I'm glad you got to experience some of the great people in that industry, because it's always fascinated me. I can't I can't keep a beat if my life depended on it. So, yeah, so I'm glad it doesn't. There's just some things I know I'm not good at, and that's one of them. So I really appreciate you being on here. If there's anything you want to say now, would be the time to touch anybody out there. Anything that you want to say to anybody out there, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, Jay, thank you for having me on, because I've been saying recently, it's really a healing for me to use my voice. It's a healing for my maternal bloodline, the women in my bloodline, to use my voice and to speak up about what healing generational trauma and addictions are. If you're out there struggling, I send you blessings and light and love. And I hope that you can find it in yourself, one breath at a time, one moment at a time, to go inside, sit under a tree, sit in the grass, and learn to maybe love her again, Mother Nature, because she's going to probably feed you more than a lot of the things around you. And to start to sit in silence, maybe that, and breathe, and just to start to awaken maybe the pain, but believe it or not, that can be loving if you're able to cry and feel it and write about it. Get into an art class, a sewing class, a martial arts class, a yoga class, a gym class. Get in, it's that type of thing. So that's the message I send out there. You can find me at heatherandferri.com, my website. Read my stories and download my ebook for free. And I'll have a store soon with medical meditations that you can use at home, because part of my books that are coming out and my programs are, I do want to empower people. You can use a coach and teacher, and that's great. But you can also do it on your own, and you can become your own healer. It just takes a lot of time. I didn't become this in a day. This took a lot of hours, like a lot.
It takes work, and it takes effort. And the more effort you put into it, the more you'll get out. Yeah. That's hands down across the board of whatever you're going through, whether that be addiction, recovery from life in general, mental health, whatever illness, you got to put stuff in to get stuff out. Plain and simple. Nothing in this world except for grace is free. And that's it. I appreciate you coming on here, Heather. And I hope I said the last name the right way.
You did.
I come from a long line of Ferreras. So it's like, I'm going to say Ferrari, and I know it. So no, it's Ferri. So I appreciate you coming on here. I'm glad you did. I look forward to any discussions we have in the future. Yeah. And like I said, I really appreciate the conversation. It was great.
Thank you.
And that's Rock and Recovery. Y'all keep doing the next right thing. Remember, 988 in US and Canada, 111 in the UK. If you're going through something, reach out and talk to somebody. And for anybody out there that's listening, just let somebody know that you're there for them. That's it. That's all we can do in this world. And we're out.